Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Harden, and I am a residency placement coordinator with Kansas City University. And I am a member of the Council on Residency Placement, which is a council within the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. And CORP, as we like to call ourselves, we are a collaboration of residency placement advising team members from osteopathic medical schools all across the country. And one of our goals that we have is to provide support and career development resources to our medical students to assist and facilitate you through your transition to residency. So today's session is focused on the curriculum vitae, or the CV, and how to build a solid foundation on your CV and do what we can to help you set you up for success as you begin this residency application process over the next few years. So we have several panelists that have joined us today, and I'm going to let them each introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into the Q&A. A lot of the questions had been submitted in advance. We also are going to, you can also submit questions through the chat as well, and we'll answer those towards the end. So let's get started. Dr. Angela Walker, would you mind going first?
Yeah, I'm Angela Walker. I'm KCU grad from 2012. I'm currently an orthopedic surgeon, foot and ankle specialist. I work with the residency program through KCU and research. We have 16 residents now, I believe. I specifically do their foot and ankle rotations, so each resident spends about 3 months with me. My background, I'm from a small town in Northeast Kansas. I went to undergrad in a little tiny school in central Kansas called Bethany College, where I played basketball and softball. I went to KCU for medical school. Got my residency spot here with the current group that I'm with. Went to LA for a year, did a fellowship in foot and ankle surgery, and then came back and joined my current group. So I am the associate program director here alongside Dr. Charles Orth. So been in practice now 4.5 years. So that's
awesome.
Me.
Thank you. And Dr. Doug Harley, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. So I'm Doug Harley. I'm Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine graduate back in 2002. Basically, I've spent my whole career in I'm a program director for Cleveland Clinic Acton General. We have 21 residents in our program. I've been with the program now for about 14 years, the PD over the last 3. One of the other pieces that we talked about, building your curriculum vitae, just kind of some of the other hats that I have on is, so I'm also the current president for the Ohio Academy of Physicians Medicine group in the state of Ohio, as well as the vice president for our Ohio Osteopathic Association under the AOA, and then serve on various chapters or various committees within the ACOFP, which is our national chapter. So that's pretty much what I got at this point, Katie.
Wonderful. Dr. John Casey.
Hey there. First, I'm not going to give any pointers on giving a webinar from a car because my flight came in late, but I didn't want to miss you guys because I love students. You guys are awesome. So I'm the program director for emergency medicine at Doctors Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I was the associate director before that. I spent many years working as the program director, but also serving in many capacities within the AOA. I now serve with the ACGME on the Osteopathic Recognition Committee and spend a lot of time mentoring rising students as well as residents who are moving into the attending world. So looking forward to answering any questions you have, except about where my car is at.
All right, Dr. Ken Hiles, you're next.
Thanks, Katie. I'm Dr. Ken Hiles. I'm currently the campus dean at KCU Joplin campus. I also still hold the title of Associate Dean of Graduate Medical Education, and I am I'm also over the division of residency placement, of which Katie is part of. Historically, I've been a program director for family medicine in the past for a little over 20 years. Kind of reformed out of that, but still stay in GME, so I haven't gotten away completely. Served on numerous ACOFP committees, including chair of their Committee on Education and Evaluation for many years. I'm a past national president of ACOFP, and I was also one of the founding members of the Osteopathic Recognition Committee with ACGME. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again for your willingness to come today. So the first question I'm going to ask is actually, we're going to take turns, all of you answering this, because I think each of you with your specialties have different perspectives. What is the first thing a residency program looks for on a CV? Dr. Walker, would you answer first?
Honestly, one of the first things that we look for is board scores. Believe it or not, it's kind of a way to filter, if you will. We are historically a program that looks at the whole person, but definitely a board score is kind of one of the first things that pops out.
And a lot of students don't put, or usually don't put their board scores on their CV. What would be something on their CV or besides scores that you would recommend or that you would look at?
Research experience is probably one of the biggest ones for us, for sure.
Okay. Dr. Harley, what about you guys?
Yes, and hopefully folks are able to better hear me. I'm trying to move some of the stuff from around my computer. I saw that component of things. You know, certainly one of the things that we look for in family medicine is not going to be as much the research side of things, but really kind of even, I hate to say it, but for this applies, I think, for all of you is length of the CV. Certainly we're looking for at least a single page. If not more, but certainly we don't want fluff. And I know we'll talk more about that this evening as far as, you know, we don't want fluff within the CV. We'll want it to be actual stuff. But certainly the length of the CV really or the meat of what's in the CV really speaks to you as a candidate. And I think that's one of the first pieces we always look at before we dive into what the actual content is kind of what it looks like just from first general impression.
Awesome. And Dr. Casey?
Yeah, so we definitely just take a look at the overall CV, kind of what the appearance is. You know, does it look like it's tried to be fluffed up? But more importantly, just the basics, right? So a really well-written personal summary, like who you are and what you do and why you want to do that. For example, why you want to be an emergency physician, or a really clear guidance about the things that you're passionate about, like mission work in medicine or something like that. It'll help it kind of stick out a little bit in our mind. And a real easy pointer, but the number of times we see it get missed, is just spelling, right? It's really, I'm just going to be honest, it's really disheartening when somebody has clearly not put the time in to do that, because when you send something with a bunch of misspells in it, it sends a signal that you don't have attention to detail and that you probably threw this together last minute and didn't really care enough about it. And that is, if I don't know anything else about you as a program director, that's what I'm going to assume you're going to be like as a resident, and you probably wouldn't be a great fit for our program. So just making sure that it's clean and good syntax and appropriately spelled words. You'd be amazed how much they jump out at you.
And Dr. Hiles?
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments per se, but I will say family medicine doesn't look at research as much as other things, nor do they look as much as any potential publications. But the one thing that I always looked at was because I was looking more for the well-rounded student going into primary care that encompassed everything. So I was looking at what type of community services were you doing, what type of extracurricular activities, and those type of things to basically your balance, the balance of you as an individual, and looking at the overall global application where you would look at board scores and grades and so forth, but I would take that into account along with the balance of the of your community service, community activities, etc.
Awesome. Okay, so this is another question for all of you. What is the best advice to give a first-year medical student in terms of building their CV as they're just starting medical school? So Dr. Walker, we'll start with you.
I think one of the best things I can tell any medical student, especially when you're starting to get your feet wet, is just look for any opportunity that you can to be involved. Obviously, like they said, we don't want fluff on the CV, but if you have an opportunity to be a leader in one of the organizations on your campus, or an opportunity to get involved in writing a research paper, and research isn't everything, I know I said that, but just look for opportunities and actively look for ways to be involved in your medical school, or even shadowing opportunities, things like that. I know some of, at least as in my position right now, some of the best shadowing opportunities that I think some students have found have just been from one-off comments about people asking. You know, you don't find opportunities if you don't look for them, and if you don't ask people. So don't be afraid to look for those things.
Dr. Harley, what
Yeah,
would
I'm
you
going to
say?
build. I absolutely agree with what Dr. Walker talked about as far as looking for opportunities. I think one of the biggest things that I always talk with first year students about is starting early. I think that's the biggest part. Even if it may just be your undergraduate degree, start to build your CV now at the beginning of your career. And then as you do things that are worthy of adding to the CV, add them immediately. What you don't want to have happen is you're getting down to, you have a scholarship you want to apply for. It's time for applying for residency, and you're like, okay, now I got to put everything together. Finding all of those details later, it can be incredibly difficult, and it can be a lot easier to leave gaps and those kind of things. So really starting early and adding often is going to be your best thing. And the other part I would also encourage folks to do, and you can really tailor this to however works best for you, is to save your old versions of your CV as well. Don't just keep adding to the CV, but maybe once a year, once every 6 months, however often you're adding something, have an old copy and then put the new copy in as being updated on such and such date, and save that file. That way you have old copies that you can go back to. Because one of the things that I know, one of the previous questions that came in was, how far back do you go with stuff? Certainly it's going to be dependent upon what it is you're applying for and what you're doing. So some of those things that you might have done in high school or undergrad could be pertinent to one thing, but may not necessarily be pertinent to everything. So if you have various versions of your CV, that can be helpful to go back and gather information from.
All right, Dr. Casey, what about you? What best advice do you have for a first year?
Yeah, I would certainly echo Dr. Harley. I think starting, if you don't have one already, starting a CV your first year in medical school is a great way to kind of get that foundation going. What I would say is, particularly early on, most medical students don't really know what specialty they're interested in. And so a lot of times what you see is later on, they will put on like this myriad of clubs that they were involved in. And we actually, all as PDs, we understand those first couple of years you're exploring. So it isn't really helpful to me if you list you were in the anesthesia group and the internal medicine group and the orthopedic group, and you were in all of these groups. That actually doesn't really help me as a program director, right? Because pretty much everyone explores those different groups. What you really need to focus on is finding a few things that you're passionate in. And it can certainly be 2 different groups, but making sure that you make the breadth and depth of that experience appropriate over the next year or 2. So as you start to call those things out, it doesn't become just an exhaustive list of things you tried and didn't really pan out. It becomes a really good collection of things that you did. And make sure you document kind of what you're doing in those groups, so that when you get to the end and you're writing your kind of final CV before you send it, you're able to talk about the things that you did for 3 years in the emergency medicine club, for example, that may have escaped your mind, but you were really engaged and it took a lot of time to do. And those achievements will then be documented for you and make your application just that much stronger.
Awesome. Dr. Hiles, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree with everything that's been said. Just a few things that I would reiterate is definitely always keep your CV current. Because all of a sudden, if you get to the end of third year and you've got to get a CV put together for audition rotations or for residency applications, trying to remember what you did over the last 3 or 4 years is virtually impossible. So, if you keep it current and like Dr. Harley said, even if you have new versions every year, but save the old ones. The other thing that to follow off of what Dr. Casey said is you may be a member of 3, 4, 5, 8 different clubs, and that's all well and good. You don't need to list all those in your CVs. What I would do is if you are a club officer, if you were in, a class officer, or if you were in, the Student Government Association, since they are pretty much all office positions, I would more list the offices that you hold is more important than listing the fact that you were in 7 or 8 different clubs. Try to keep them minimum, and then as you move towards what you feel like you want to do going into your specialty or your specialty of desired acceptance, then you would want to kind of hone it down to those that would be a little more specialty specific, but definitely keep your student government and class officer stuff on there, because that again, that tells me as a program director, especially if you held a student government position through 3 or 4 years, that that you already have leadership qualities before you even come into medicine, before you even come into the residency.
All right, thank you. So the next question, research is a really hot topic, and I can even see in the chat it's a hot topic. So one question that came up quite a few times when students registered was, and I'll let whoever decide want to answer this question, if we don't have a lot of access to research in our home institution, what are some ways to find or seek out research opportunities to get the necessary exposure to make ourselves more competitive? Any suggestions?
Yeah. So I'll do one, I think, for everyone, but I certainly like this in emergency medicine. We get it, right? Program directors understand that you're not going to be it's the rare student that is involved in like a high level NIH grant. It's usually through some previous graduate work or some close contact that you may have had, but that is not the vast majority of students. What I would say though is that taking the initiative, which I think most people should do during their 4 years of medical school, to do something like a case study or a case report is a great way to demonstrate that you are involved in the process, that you can synthesize and present material, whether it's a poster presentation, whether it's a short report, a case study. All of those things are also included in that area, and really are a great way to kind of get your name out there, even if you're not involved in a detailed, long, more substantive research study. Those types of things really do make an impact, and they start you on a road to success by demonstrating that you can already do something that you're going to be expected to do as a resident anyway.
Awesome. So should I include research experience that I completed prior to medical school? And that's actually multiple questions have been asked about all things, and I know Dr. Harley touched a little bit, but how much of prior to medical school content should students be including in their CV? Dr. Walker, what would you want to see on your student CVs, on your applicants? Should they include things from prior to medical school?
I think if it's worthy including, then yes. I mean, if you were lucky enough or able to actually get in on a PubMed published article when you were an undergrad, then absolutely put that on there. I don't think that's ever going to hurt anything, you know. That's, I guess, the short answer.
Dr. Casey, would you want to see volunteering and work experience and things from prior to medical school on their CVs as well? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, that's the hazard of being on the phone. Absolutely. And I've answered a few questions in the chat, but what I will say is previous experience in whatever is important to have on there. I'll give you a great example for emergency medicine. We really love people that have customer service experience, because a great deal of what we do in emergency medicine is based on very quick, brief interactions with patients, where if you've had time that you've served as a waiter or a waitress, where if you've worked as a barista, if you've worked in hospitality, those things are really relevant. And a lot of people entering in their 30s or 40s with life work experience, all of those things need to be included. The things that are kind of superfluous, right, is if you've graduated, summa cum laude from your undergraduate institution, it really doesn't help me to know that you were an honors graduate of your high school and were in alpha, beta, gamma, whatever group it was, because you now already have demonstrated that later on in your CV. So just look at your CV, make sure it's well-rounded. You don't have to list every job you've maybe done, but list the ones that really are pertinent to the specialty that you're going to be applying to. And feel free to ask people what type of previous work experience would be helpful in that profession.
And that goes into another question. What about those students that are your non-traditional students that maybe had a career prior? Do they include everything from undergrad as well as their career path prior to medical school, or is it really dependent upon what specialty or what they did?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that one. I think in part it depends on what they did. And for example, if you and I'm going to answer this in conjunction with one of the questions that I just read, asking about, if you were in leadership in I'll use the term a previous life before medical school, whether it be an engineering project, director or what have you, do you continue leadership? Well, those type of things that have put you more on the forefront in your previous jobs, then yes, I would include that, especially if it does involve something that was related to a degree that you ascertained. And as far as the getting to the question, it's like if you had leadership experience before medical school, do you continue that or not? I would strongly recommend that you do everything you can to continue it, because as a program director, if I'm looking at that, it's like, okay, you did all these things as a leader before medical school, and then all of a sudden you dropped out of everything. But the first thought is, can you not balance things? I mean, was it that much of a struggle? Were you that disengaged in doing anything but concentrating just on medicine, on the studies? And that's where, as I mentioned earlier, we look at the, somewhat of a balance. So if you've been in leadership in a previous occupation, et cetera, then I would really strive to maintain some sort of leadership while you're going through medical school, because that would look much better than if you just dropped it.
Absolutely agree with that. If it's
go
okay,
ahead.
Katie.
Go ahead, Dr.
I absolutely agree with that, Dr. Hiles. I think, one of the other parts that I think this also still builds on, and as we're kind of talking about different parts of this, I put in the chat, but I want to say it verbally as well, is I think, the other part of this is you're trying to figure out, what should or shouldn't be in your CV. I think it's great to see the number of attendees that are here this evening, because this is not obviously something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about, but don't forget about the resources that you have at home. think about your professors at your College of Osteopathic Medicine. If you're a third or a fourth year, don't forget about the faculty in the residency program that you're thinking about applying to. There's nothing that says you can't ask for advice as far as what a good CV would look like, or do I put this in the CV or do I not put it in? We can be some of the best resources for you to help guide that component. And I know a lot of you have had a lot of questions on the chat board that we probably may not even always get to this evening, but don't hesitate to ask your folks at home about those parts. They're going to definitely be willing to help you. Sorry, Katie, I didn't mean to interrupt. I wanted to make sure.
Oh, no, you're
get that
fine.
in there.
So how much description is too much description? Do you guys like to see bullets? Do you like to see paragraphs? What's your preference as far as what they focus on in the description and how much?
I think, at least for us, a couple bullet points is really all it takes. And it can even be dependent on what the activity is. I mean, if you tell me that one of your volunteer activities was Habitat for Humanity, you don't need to put a whole lot of descriptors under that because that's a well-known entity. But if it's maybe a more localized club or something like that, that's unique to your med school or those kind of things, you may want to have a couple of bullet points as far as what the activities were that they did. Because if we're not from the same state, we may not have the same understanding of what that all involves.
I think as far as like the general style, I think bullet points are probably better for a CV to keep it concise and keep things that flow well and look pleasing to the eye. I don't want to look at a CV and see 5 different paragraphs all in a row. That's just too much wordage, because your CV is designed to get a comprehensive yet almost a quick glimpse of who you are as a person, right? So you want it to be pertinent, you want it to be pleasing to the eye, and you want it to give a good representation of who you are.
And I would agree completely, especially with what Dr. Walker said, is that, you want your CV to be a really good snapshot of what you do, and you can't do a snapshot in a paragraph. And if I'm sitting there looking at a paragraph or 2 or 3, I'm probably not going to sit there and read it, because I'm not going to sit there and try to decipher exactly what are we talking about, what did we do, what didn't we do. I mean, I'm a huge bullet point fan on just about everything, because just get to the point. I don't need, I look at paragraphs as fluff a lot of times, and I don't need that. I just get to the point of what you're trying to make. So I'm a huge bullet point person myself.
And for those of you that are regular sentence people, don't despair. There's a way to do it as well. I did drop it in the chat. Bullet points are great, but sometimes that aesthetic can look a little weird too. So what I recommend is 1 sentence if it's a pretty regular, well understood activity. No more than 2 sentences. 2 sentences would be like, I was the national vice president of SOMA and did this, 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 and this, right? You get 2 sentences for that. But for most activities, if you can't put it succinctly in 1 sentence, that means your case histories are going to be too long for me anyway.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So this is probably another question that may be beneficial for all of you to answer, but how much weight does your program put on leadership experiences when reviewing applicants?
Sorry, I didn't hear what type of experiences.
Leadership experiences.
Okay, thanks. Since I asked the interrupting question, I'll start, and then I can throw it to my colleagues. For emergency medicine, clearly I like leadership. However, I also recognize that not everybody is going to be a leader all the time. The important thing isn't that you have to be the president or vice president of whatever. Of course, that's great if you are, right? But the important thing is that you just weren't superficially engaged in things. So if you weren't necessarily the president of the club, right? But you engaged with the club, showed up to the meetings, and meaningfully contributed to that organization. That is also valuable leadership experience. And that is something that needs to be detailed. And that is something that can be a little bit harder to do if it didn't come with a title. And that's why I really encourage you to be really brief and clear, but use a sentence or two to tell me how you were a leader. Leading from the middle is a well-established phenomenon. And if you're able to do it, that is something that I highly recommend you highlight about yourself.
And I would agree with that. The other thing I would add is, some of this depends on essentially two things. Number one, or three things, I guess. Number one, what specialty you're going into? Number two, how many other residency programs are at the institution? And is the institution more of a community or rural based, or is it an urban based? I said, because if you get into a more of a community or rural base, they're going to be looking more for your community engagement and your volunteer work, not as much in leadership, where if you're in an academic institution, they're going to be probably looking more towards the leadership skills in those type things. And I agree completely with Dr. Casey, even though I did say I'm more of a bullet point person, but if you were that active person in the club and say you took chairman of a fundraising thing that the club sponsored, then you want to make sure that you highlight that even though you weren't the president or vice president, but you chaired, this fundraiser or that. So, I guess the hard thing about some of these is each one is somewhat individualized. And I think most schools now also have either a residency advising or that. So that there are questions that you can bounce off of them also, because it's hard to make generalizations across, all specialties and in all demographics. But, I think that pretty much all the comments that I've heard so far have been pretty much spot on. And it becomes variable as to where the location and the specialty is.
Awesome. Dr. Harley, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
That's okay.
Oh, you froze. And Dr. Harley froze up on us. Dr. Walker, did you have anything?
Trying to read some of the questions.
Oh, Dr. Harley, there you are. You're back. You froze for a second.
Okay. Everybody else was moving on my end. So that's why it was surprising that I was frozen. So I actually did not have a huge amount more to add to that. So I think that threw out a lot of the stuff.
Dr. Walker, with orthopedics, what's your take on the value of leadership experiences on an applicant's CV?
Obviously leadership is important. I don't think it's everything in a CV, if you want to know the truth. I agree with everything else that's been mirrored. I feel like we just want to know that you've been involved. I think honestly, you can almost be over involved to a degree. If you say that you've been president of 15 different clubs or a treasurer or whatever title you want to call it, just to put more stuff on your CV, and almost if you have too many commitments, is it like how much we're able to actually devote to each of those organizations? So I don't know, it's definitely a fine line with some of this stuff. And it is very individualized, I think, in both medical specialties as well as the individual person. So I don't know. It's important, and we look at the person as a whole, like everybody else does, but I don't think it's everything.
And just to add to that very quickly, I think, when we come to leadership and involvement and stuff, yes, it is important, but what you have to be careful of, and this is where the balance comes in, is you can't involve yourself to the point where it does hinder your academics. Your academics still has to come first. So, you can get whatever you want without a lot of different activities. Maybe a little more difficult, but you can still get there, but you can't get what you want with poor academics.
one other piece that I can add in, and I apologize, I lost my train of thought with the freezing part that I had there. I think one of the other parts that could be a caveat to this, and certainly I think we all as residency leadership try to avoid bias in how we look at applications and so forth, but I think there is some that comes in that no matter how hard we try. From the leadership standpoint of things, I think if you look at the programs that you're applying to, and kind of look up the faculty, see if the faculty are doing anything in particular on a leadership basis. I think that can be a predictor of where there may be some more focus in that program. For instance, when I was originally looking at my program as coming on as faculty, that was one of the things that I looked at. And two of my fellow faculty members held national positions within organized medicine. And that was one of the things that was near and dear to my heart. So that was an easy transition into that. Does not mean that all of our residents do national organized medicine or even on the state level. I try to make sure that we offer them the opportunity if they're interested, but it's not a requirement. But I think you really kind of have to make sure you know your audience of where you're looking at as well, because that can really play a part of it. Because, Ken talked about rural programs may not be as big on that, but I know some rural programs that those rural docs are, that have been past presidents and so forth. And so that may be, yeah, exactly. That's going to be a much bigger like feather in your cap as you're talking to them, because it's that shared experience piece. And so I think that could play a role. So it's really good to know your audience. And I know that's hard for us to say for you as students, because you're not typically, hopefully, applying to one singular program. You're trying to apply to multiple different places. But I think certainly knowing your audience can be a big, huge help for you as far as how you develop what you're putting together.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so another question regarding experiences. If a large part of a student's experience is in political spaces or religious organizations, is that something that's safe to include? If so, how explicit or detailed should they be in regards to their work in an organization such as a political or religious?
I think it's okay to put on there personally. I think if your religion or political affiliation is important to you, I don't know how much detail I would go into it though. If it's a part of your identity and who you are, then put it on there, but I wouldn't go into a lot of detail about it perhaps. Because you don't know, especially with politics, you don't always know your audience, right? And if you put something on there that somebody doesn't like, that might be an automatic no for them, so I think if you were a big part of something, probably put it in there, but I wouldn't go into maybe a ton of detail about, obviously don't put your individual stance on it, right? Because that can sadly completely sway somebody the wrong way.
I was just going to build off of that, because I think absolutely, Angela, I think that could go either way for you, but I think it also really is dependent upon how strong of a conviction is it for you. How important is that part of your life and what your identity is? Because we also need to know that part as well, because I think, we don't want you necessarily to come in and feel as though you have to hide who you are in the process of things. We want to see who your genuine self is. At least that's from our standpoint, at least as we look at individuals.
Yeah, and letting people know pieces of yourself is actually a great way to make a connection. You have to be realistic about these things, right? There are certain things that if you put them down, they're just going to be triggers for people, right? So this is your CV. Just avoid that. Don't put yourself in the position. And if you have a question about that, show it to one of your faculty members at school and go, what would you think if a student applied to this school with this on their application, right? Is a really easy litmus test you can use. And along with that, though, there are really great ways. I mean, there are people that are very active in their church or their community. What I would say is, don't just put that on there to give me something that you've been active in, right? Like, I understand there are 24 hours in a day and how people choose to spend it, whether it's with their family or whether it's with an organization or whatever. But tell me how that rounds you out. For example, if you're very involved in your church's mission to feed the hungry, right? And you volunteer at a soup kitchen once a week because you think that's it's a very important part of your religion. Well, that's also very important part of your work history, right? Because that's an ongoing solid commitment that demonstrates you have compassion for your fellow man, right? So there are ways to put things on there that have to do with religion and politics. For example, it's perfectly fine to say, let's say you were very involved in a congressional campaign, right? Focus your energy on the congressional campaign and what you did and what your work experience was, not on that you're the biggest supporter of candidate X ever, right? Use it to display how it's going to help you be a good resident physician in my program.
Wonderful. Okay, so something else about whether or not to include in a CV. Should I attended a national conference? Should I include that on my CV? Just attended, not presented at. What's your take?
My take, to be blunt, is I see that as fluff.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't,
I was gonna say, I wouldn't, it would do nothing for me. Now, if you presented, that's a different story.
or had a poster or something. that's
Right.
fine.
Now, what about volunteer experiences that were a one-time event, such as a one-time holiday volunteering, included or not?
I think it goes along with the entire theme of kind of everything we've been talking about. If it's something you're passionate about and you volunteer at a soup kitchen every single week and you've been doing it for 5 years and you love it and you've gotten a lot out of it, then absolutely put it on there. If it's a one-off thing, you did it in your hometown and it took you 30 minutes to do, I would not put that on there. No.
So before we go to the live Q&A, I want to, or the answer questions that have come up in the Q&A and chat. This is what I want to have all of you answer. And Dr. Casey answered a little bit at the very, very beginning. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see on student CVs that you review? Dr. Walker,
Beyond
do you
what-
want to? Oh yeah, Dr. Harley, why don't you go
Beyond
first?
what Dr. Casey's already said, I think those are, at least for me, the biggest two is the spelling and syntax. I think one of the other parts that we also see as mistakes can be lapses in time that are not accounted for, particularly in the education side of things. If there's a year or two that happens between high school and undergrad, or undergrad and high school, undergrad and medical school, and you don't have anything that talks about what happened in that time frame, that lets us fill it in with whatever we think might have happened in that time frame. For all we know, you were sitting in jail somewhere, or down on a beach somewhere. We don't know. So filling that part in can be incredibly helpful. Don't wait to fill that in at the interview, because that might not get you the interview if we're worried too much about those blanks.
Dr. Walker, anything you would add as common mistakes you see?
I don't know if I have anything much more to add.
I think the only other thing I would add is to make sure that your CV is organized. You have the topic of education and work experience, etc. Don't mix them all up. Don't if you, oh wait, I forgot to put that in there, so I'm just going to put it in at the end. No, go back and make sure make sure that everything is organized and that things stay in the same format.
Yep.
That goes
And
back
one
to what
other-
Dr. Casey said before, is it shows that you're your organizational skill.
And that you just took
and-
the time to put effort into it, right? You know, we can tell when something's not been, when thought hasn't been put into something.
Yeah, one other quick pearl, don't include references. I can explain more if you want, but just trust me.
Isn't that what letters of recommendation are for?
It is, and when you know, potentially listing references, the same thing. You don't know, maybe I have a really bad history with Dr. Walker, and when you put Dr. Walker down as a reference, you know, that triggers me, right? So I'm going to be able to talk to people that I need to talk to anyway, so you don't have to offer them up on a platter.
All right, so I'm going to try to go to some of the live questions. And if there's any you guys have seen that you want to answer live, we can just absolutely do those. For those of us who have families and limited time to be involved in extracurricular activities because of family commitments, how do you evaluate a CV from a student with this kind of background? What type of activities would be the highest yield for us?
So I think this goes back, I mean, we always look at the whole person, right? So somebody who hasn't maybe had as many opportunities to volunteer and things like that, put in your work experience, put in, you know, we want to know that you are capable of working hard and that you're capable of taking on tasks and completing tasks, you know. So if you have work experience, I think that holds a significant amount of weight if you're not able to, you know, be involved in 15 different organizations on your campus.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, I consider my program to be a very family-friendly program. But I will say one thing you have to be careful of in that is you don't want your CV to come across as, I was too busy with my home life to do other things. Because what you're doing there, it's not that that's a bad thing. It's though that you're kind of making a value judgment that your choices were better than other people that could be involved in clubs, right? And that's kind of how that reads sometimes. And you don't intend it to, but that's what it comes across as. So I would say even with your family, finding one medical or school related thing that you're involved with, even if it's something that involves the families, is a great way to put something on your CV that is meaningful and show that you are also willing to do things outside of the family to help promote your career, because it's going to be expected in residency as well.
And Dr. Casey, I would agree completely, because, you know, the other way that can be looked at is that, well, the reason I wasn't involved, it was my family's fault. You're blaming your family for your lack of involvement. So, you know, that is a significant turnoff for most program directors.
All right, so I've presented the same research at multiple conferences, the same content each time. Is it okay to list each presentation separately on my CV, or should I only list it once? Anybody want to take that one?
If it's the same content, I would lean towards listing it at one of the bigger major conferences. I mean, if you did it at your local medical society, or you did it at a school club, but you also did it at the the American College of Osteopathic Internists annual convention, I would prioritize where it's listed. Don't list the same thing 6 times, especially if it was exactly the same, but go to the highest level conference that you presented it at.
Yeah, building off of that, one of the pieces I had answered in the chat was if it was similar project, but it was different formats. So say you did it at one conference as a poster, another as an oral, and then you even had a publication from it, then you would want to list it out separately then. And a lot of times the best way to organize your CV, especially if you have multiple things, would be to do almost a header of, these are my publications, these are my oral presentations, these are my poster presentations. That way for us, it's a nice, easy, quick way to see exactly a snapshot in time of what it is that you've done.
All right, so red flags, should they be addressed in a CV or do those belong in a personal statement or somewhere else?
I don't know that I would put many red flags, if any, in the CV. I would lean more towards this personal statement or a separate, a separate document, separate documentation of some sort. I don't think red flags belong in a CV personally.
Agree.
100%
Personal statement is the easiest place to put a little bit of a taste of what it is, what that red flag was, what you did to kind of address it. And then really it leaves it up, if you are invited in for an interview, to talk more about it and to give us more information. And I think from an interview standpoint, be prepared to talk about it, because we are going to ask you that and we will want more details.
There've been a number of questions about the format. What advice do you guys have as far as the format, whether it be the heading, the order of the sections, and there's a lot of questions about even just font and color and graphics and logos and things. What do y'all say?
So anything that you can do to make it easier on the person reviewing is how you get it to stand out. A non-obtrusive logo, again, might be fine, but from my perspective as a PD, it doesn't really help me because it doesn't add anything, right? Your name and your contact information and the things you want me to know should be highlighted, right? So emphasizing really important things with bold or italics is really important. And as my esteemed colleagues have said before, breaking it into really clean headers is probably one of the single most important steps behind making sure everything is spelled right. Because when I look at your CV and I want to know very quickly, do you have any experience presenting? If I can flip to a section that says presentations and it shows me 2 or 3 things that are done, that has made your CV helpful to me. And it has also made it much more favorable for me to kind of move on with you as an applicant.
What
Yeah, I
about a
think-
photo? Do you guys recommend including the student's headshot photo on the first page or no?
We don't.
It's weird.
No.
Yeah.
I think one of the other parts I was going to comment to Katie about what you talked about as far as like order of stuff. I think, for the students, if you go to one CV writing discussion at a conference, or like tonight, you will hear one way to put it. And you go to another one, you'll hear another way. There's really no right or wrong way. It's really what works best for you is really going to be the big part as far as what goes first, posters or presentations or publications or those kind of things. Everybody has different opinions. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong, but you usually do want to start out, like Dr. Casey said, with the pertinent information of like who you are, education piece, work history. Those are typically going to be your first big ones that are right at the top.
You just want to keep it consistent. And as far as the picture goes, that's on the application. I would not put one on the CV.
And in fact, actually building off of that, because ARIS now, to help reduce the potential for bias, is actually it's actually a button that we have to push separately if we want to have pictures, because they're trying to avoid having us have access to the pictures. So that it helps to reduce some of the potential bias that is in having a picture on your application.
All right, so how relevant are listing awards on your CV if it dates back to undergraduate time, such as leadership awards or scholarships received? Is that something that's considered fluff?
I think it depends.
I personally had scholarships from high school, and I can tell you that nobody in my current job cares about them. So if it's, you know, like scholarship money that you got, no, I wouldn't put that in there. I think that's fluff. You know, if it was truly a leadership position that you held in high school or something like that, fine. But awards, things like that from previous, I'd say no personally.
Would you say the same for undergrad? Or
You
include
know, if you
those?
were summa cum laude or magna cum laude, things like that, then sure, you can put that on there. But, you know, if you received academic scholarship money, I don't think that's pertinent, no.
So we don't usually, I don't typically look for scholarship stuff, but if you're talking about awards, one of the ones that we typically will look for, and I apologize, I don't know if there's an alternative on the other side, but for high school or undergrad, an Eagle Scout Award is one of the ones that can be a very valuable testament of your leadership skills. I apologize, I don't know if there is one that is involved for the Girl Scouts of similar caliber.
Yeah, and you know, what I was gonna say is if it is a if it's a national award, then yes, I would most likely put it on there. Or if it's something that's very prestigious that would be known outside of your small area, then maybe yes, but for the most part, I mean, you know, you could have a list of 20 awards that mean nothing outside of your institutions. But if it's a national award, then or a very prestigious award, then yes, I would probably add it.
All right, so we just have like 2 minutes left. So 30 seconds or less, I want you to tell me what is the one thing that you have loved to see the most on a CV? And I'll have each of you, Dr. Walker, you want to go first. What's the one thing you enjoy seeing on a CV?
I think if you could showcase, gosh, one thing.
You as a PD, what do you enjoy seeing when you look at us on a CV?
I like to see that the person's a whole person, right? I like to see that they have passions, that they can work hard, that they do have leadership skills, and that they are, gosh, what am I trying to look for? I like to see that, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. That they're more than just academics, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Rounded. Dr. Harley.
Yeah, two things really kind of fall equal weight is meaningful volunteer experience or meaningful leadership experience, because that's what really tells me a little bit more about them as a whole person. Really better understand of what kind of resident they're going to be moving forward and what kind of physician they're going to be ultimately.
Wonderful. Dr. Casey.
I honestly love to see that they have at least once presented something, wherever it may be, because for a lot of people, it's a scary thing to get in front of a group of people. But to show that you are willing to do that, it shows leadership, creativity, initiative, and it is probably one of the single biggest highlights that show that you are going to be a successful resident, in my humble opinion.
Awesome. And Dr. Howes, really quick.
Yeah, I would agree with the other three. And the other thing that I would always look for is I want it to be very concise. I don't want to have to sit there and go through pages. I mean, if you can get the high points on 1.5 pages, that's perfect for me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all 4 of you for your time today. We're so thankful and grateful that you guys are willing to come. And for our attendees, thank you for participating. Today's session was recorded and it will be available on the AOGME website in a few days. So thank you for attending.